Sumana, shall we start?
Shiva, we can start. Yeah. Only I think 2-3 left. Rest everybody has joined.
Okay. So, very good morning, everyone. Welcome to, I think, day 3. We are on day 3 of the program. So, from today, it will be more, as we said, more of the practical application. We made a small beginning in terms of understanding how do we go about attempting the case study. So, today we will be into the, I would say, into the thick of things when it comes to trying to understand the Opel. And again, thanks to quite a lot of you. All of you have sent across the revised activity, which has come out really well. At least at the first look, even though I've tried to consolidate all of them, one of the good things is that I'm able to see very good paragraphs and quite a lot of coloring that has been done in terms of the attributes. So that shows I would say, the first level of trying to get into the Opel. I'm sure that based on the deliberations today, we should be able to understand that much better and get a much, I would say, a firm grip by Friday, when we would have done almost all both the exercises, plus also having gone through the process of consensus and the others. So today, what I intend taking you through initially is explain to you first about the award assessment process, and then we will also get into the principle of what we call as the consensus and the individual assessment, because now it's almost been 2 days since all of you have done the individual assessment. Now, from further on, we will try to build as to how is it that we leverage the diversity within the assessment groups, because each one of you come in with a different perspective. As we go through now, you will see each one of you would have written your strengths and OFIs in a different way, and there would also be a lot of learnings from each one of you from your other colleagues. We'll also try to help you out on that. And before I go ahead with today's program, so just wanted to take a minute for trying to share something a little bit different. This is more something like a complimentary invite. Sumana and Nagma will share the mails with all of you. We are having a international conference on Industry 4.0 as well as some. Hello.
Yeah, sure. We'll share it, Shiva. You can share it with us. I'll share the mail with everyone.
Yeah, I've already sent it to you.
Okay, sure. So we will send it.
Sure. So this is a complimentary invite to all of you for the entire NTPC group. Plus, Sumana, you can also share it with our other.
Priyanka, Mehul, and Indranil. I'll share it with them also. Yeah, sure.
So you will see that there are an array of speakers. The program schedule is also sent. Has quite a lot of things with respect to what is happening in the industry. Something on what are all the new technologies, robotics, IoT, additive manufacturing. So we would request you to probably log into this and then maybe share it with your pertinent production groups today, so that you can take the benefit out of it. So that was something that I wanted to share. So Sumana and Nagma will share their link with you. You can get into that. So with that, let us try to get into our today's deliberations. Okay, so before we start today's activity, any points that need clarification from yesterday? Yesterday, what were some key learnings and some points wherein you need some clarity? Maybe we can first spend some 10-15 minutes on that and then go ahead with today's activity. And also, if you can also share what were some challenges that you encountered yesterday when you were trying to do this activity? When you did the OPEL, what was the challenge what you faced while doing this activity?
Shiva, I had a very difficult issue. When I compared the text with which the sample document was written, I found it quite different from what has been given in the this thing model document.
Okay.
So that was a challenge for me. So I had what I did. I went by what the applicant has written.
Okay. But what you are saying is there is a difference between what the criterion says and what is it that the applicant is written, right?
Yeah. There is a difference between what the criteria wants and what the applicant has shown.
But at a macro level, were you able to relate to it and find a few OFIs, at least the areas which were addressed?
Yes, I have done that. I have done that from that level only.
Okay, that's good. That is good. Anything else anybody would want to share from yesterday? Not only on this activity, plus also on some of the issues that need clarity as well. Any points that were not clear? Because yesterday was the first day when we went into the OPEL. So while you understood the concept of OPEL at a macro level, when you are trying to do that coloring based on the quality of the statements, whatever you have written, what were some problems that you faced in understanding the OPEL framework?
I'm Chandramali. Something I noticed, or rather, I felt it that way, was that the framework talks about A, D, E, and L, evaluation and learning in the earlier parts. The earlier parts, I thought when reading through the application, some points were very well established. But the later parts, E and L, that there was some ground required to be covered in that. But then whether to take it as a strength or whether to take it as an oversight, that was the problem. That was what to do.
You are right, because what you are trying to say is you were able to find evidences of the approach and the deployment, but the E and L portion of it was not very clearly evident, is what you are saying, right?
Yes, exactly. So whether to take it as an oversight or whether to take it as a strength, because if I take it as a strength, then I cannot give it as an oversight. So that was
true. That was the rule. That was the rule. Yes, you are right. Sure. We'll discuss about that when we open up the statements, whatever all of you have tried out. Yes. Anybody else? Is the OPEL conceptually clear to all of you? The approach, deployment, and the evaluation and learning. Conceptual clarity, is it okay? Or anything wherein you still need some more clarity on that? So Vivek says
Shiva, I think they are writing in the chat box. Yes.
That's what I'm saying, that Vivek says E and L needs more clarity. Yes. Anything else? Let me try to take you through one example for an OPEL. Maybe yesterday, as I said, it was only day one. Today, let me try to take you through a couple of examples so that we are able to make the point much more clear. So, okay, does NTPC use Lean or Six Sigma as an approach for driving improvements? Do you use Lean or Six Sigma? Do you use both of them? Okay, you follow TQM, but not in HR. But in the organization, do you use that? No. Okay, so Lean and Six Sigma, both of them are not very much prevalent. Okay, Fair enough. Not a problem. Let me try to take some other thing. I'm sure that all of your organizations have succession planning as a process, right? So let me try to take the example of succession planning, and let us try to run it through the radar. Since anyway it is a HR process, I think it will be much more easier for you. Why I wanted to choose Lean or Six Sigma is it would be a very, very specific example of any one particular initiative. Since I thought both of them were generic, it would be much easier. But however, let me try to take, or do you also have something like a Kaizen or something in your organizations? Do you use Kaizen as a improvement tool? All of you, since many of you are also following TQM. Because I will take one initiative and I will also take one process and I will try to run it through the Opel. So Mehul says that they are using Kaizen in JKFNR. So how about NTPC? I mean, they're an equivalent of your Kaizen could also be your suggestion schemes, which are extremely strong in the public sector. Okay, you use PIPs. PIP would mean what? Because a few organizations call it as a performance improvement program also. Okay, you are also using 5S. Okay. PC, QC, QC circle, suggestion schemes. PC would be what? Process improvement projects. Okay, PIP. But my only request is when you go out for HR excellence assessments, please don't use the word PIP, because many organizations use it as a performance improvement plan. Whereas here it is a process improvement project, and both of them could mean a little bit different contextually. So let me try to take one or two examples of maybe even 5S as well as maybe one particular process, so it's a little bit easy. Let me first try to take 5S. 5S is an initiative. Similarly, Lean, Six Sigma, theory of constraints, could be any tool, any technique, could be, I would say, any initiative which you drive, which can have your own, what do you say, meaning. Let us say if you are trying to take the case of a BPCL, it might be an Ascent, or it might be a that QSEX, or it could be different initiatives, whatever many companies run. Now let us take 5S. I would want all of you to unmute yourself and also speak up so that we can have some interaction on this. Now, what is the reason for doing 5S? What is the reason? What is the logic behind a 5S drive?
Improve the productivity.
Good, improve the productivity. Anything else? Let's take what Amit said, improve productivity. Now, look at the very first, now let us try to look at, now we are trying to apply the Opel on an initiative of 5S. Now 5S has a clear logic. What is the logic? It is to enhance productivity and reduce wastage, as Shubhadeep says. So enhance productivity, reduce wastage. Now that is the logic. And what are who are the stakeholders in this? One is the management which is driving this initiative. Another is the people who are going to be involved, right? So the management wants to reduce wastage as well as enhance productivity. And what is it that the workforce needs? Workforce needs a clean and a very, a very good working environment for them so that they are able to perform at their best, right? So there is a logic. It is based on a clear needs and expectations of stakeholders. Approach is aligned with a business strategy. Now the approach of 5S is aligned with what is a business strategy. The business strategy is very clear that you need to make your workplace more productive with lesser wastages. So that is what is a business strategy, being productive. So 5S is linked to the business strategy of being a productive organization. Now in 5S, do you have rewards, recognitions? Do you also have rolling trophies, etc.?
Sure.
You have it, right? So
Yeah.
You can also say that 5S is also linked to other approaches. What are the other approaches? It could be involvement based, it could be recognition based, or it could be rewards. Many would say that you collect points and maybe based on these points we will give you a gift. Or somebody might say that we will also have a rolling trophy so that each and every department or function would get recognized for their contribution to 5S, etc. So So approach is aligned to the business strategy of being a productive organization, as well as it is also linked to other approaches as appropriate, like involvement, reward, recognition, etc. Then is 5S, if now this is where yesterday we were also discussing about the definition of a process. When you say 5S is systematic, measurable, repeatable, scalable, flexible, etc., what does it mean? That initiative is something that is measurable, correct? You are able to see the effectiveness of 5S in terms of becoming a better workplace. You are also able to look at the score. You are able to assign a score to a particular area. There are already protocols that need to be followed for 5S. I mean, when are you going to do the 1S? How are you going to look at the elements of 2S? Those things are all there. So it is repeatable, it is measurable. The same thing can be implemented across the different places. So obviously it is also scalable. When you say flexible, what does it mean? 5S can also be done in the operations area. It can also be done in the non-operations area. It can be done anywhere. So it is something that can be implemented as a process all across, and you can also make some subtle changes in terms of the approaches for driving 5S. So does it answer all the points, all the three attributes under all the attributes under approach? Then it means that the approach of 5S is excellent because it has been able to meet all the three requirements. Now let us go to deployment. Now it says approach is consistently implemented in all the potential areas. Now 5S is implemented. First is in the shop floor, next maybe in the support areas, next maybe in the estate, next maybe in the security. So all across. Implementation is systematic and executed in a planned manner and is measurable. So when you are driving 5S, you don't take the entire organization and straight away rush with it. What do? First you will introduce in the operations area. After you learn something, once there is some success, then you will go out. Similarly, there is going to be an owner for the initiative. There are going to be different people who spearhead that this initiative. One is in the ops area, one is in the support area, and the other area. That is what. And you will also have a roadmap saying that we are wanting to be a 5S certified organization by the next 2 years. We are wanting to participate in probably in some particular competition or get recognized, something like that. So implementation is systematic and it is also executed in a planned manner and it also measurable. So it means that 3W, 1H, all those things are answered. Implementation framework has the ability to observe changes as appropriate. The way that you implement 5S in operations, the way that you implement it in probably in HR or in some other area would be different. In a manufacturing area, in a maintenance area, maybe the way that the marking, etc. that you do, or in a service area like in an office or in a HR department or somewhere, what you try to do is a little bit different. So the deployment will also be a little bit, I would say, flexible to accommodate the changes. So it answers all the 3 points under the deployment as well. Next, let us get into the evaluation and learning. Approach and deployment are regularly measured and improved for their effectiveness and efficiency. So how do you measure the effectiveness of 5S? Maybe it could be to do with the 5S score of the plant or 5S score of a particular zone or an area. That is what will tell you whether it is effective or not. What are some of the efficiency indicators for 5S? The number of 5S audits, number of 5S trained people, number of coordinators, number of audits. Now here is where I also want you to make a correlation between the lead and lag. If the number of 5S audits are on the higher side, if the number of people trained on 5S almost covers 50 or 60 or maybe close to around 80%, and you are also having, let us say it could be once in a while you are going to have some meetings where some best practices, etc. they are also being shared. Now, don't you think that all this will have a positive effect on the final 5S score of the organization? So that is where the lead and the lag connection is. That is where I said, if you have 5S as an initiative, first you need to set in certain lead indicators. Number of people trained, number of people involved, number of projects that have been done, number of visual indicators. So once all these start going up, then the likelihood of your 5S score increasing for the entire plant or for that particular area is on a higher side. That is what is the cause and effect. That is how you need to correlate the lead and the lag indicators. Now let us come to the second one. Internal and external learnings are used as triggers for improvement opportunity. Now let us say CII Eastern Region is running a 5S conference, or they are having a 5S competition. Now you go over there, you see that many organizations have driven 5S a little bit innovatively in a different way in their organizations. You look at those practices. So then you go back and tweak and learn from them, and then you are able to improve the practice and take it to the next level. That is what is the external and internal learnings being used as triggers. Once you take that trigger and then you go back and implement it in full, then it means that you have innovated or you have made a change in the process of implementing 5S. Now we are able to see that even for a tool like 5S, we are able to run it through what we call as the OPEL. That is where we say that this OPEL is nothing but a process management tool which will help you to set up good processes. It can be used for 5S, as I said, lean, or it can be used for any and every process in the world. You can use it for competency management, succession planning. You can use it for a performance management system. That is what actually we do when we do HR excellence assessment. We apply the OPEL onto any and every process to find out whether the approach is good, whether the deployment is good, or whether it has gaps, or whether the E&L criteria is good or not. This is how we try to find OFIs. And this is what you are expected to do even in this particular case study as well. No process in the world can answer all the attributes of all these points perfectly. Somewhere there will be a gap. If you identify that gap, that becomes an OFI. That is it. So let me try to run it through one more process. Let us, as I said, let us try to take succession planning. What is the logic for succession planning? For continuity of the business, because the decision making or the operations, etc., they should not fall down. So due to business continuity reasons, succession planning is something that is required. So there is a clear logic. What is the stakeholder expectations? The management needs to make sure that there is somebody who is capable, who is able to take up the guard in case if somebody is retiring, or in case of a drop dead situation, or in case of a transfer or whatever. And who is the other stakeholder over here as a part of the succession planning? Whoever is the incumbent. It is also the person, because he is also wanting to make sure that if he is a talented guy, he is also wanting to put up his best. Approach is linked with business strategy. What is business strategy? Business strategy is a BCP. And it is also linked to other approaches. Succession planning is linked to what? It is linked to leadership pipeline, capability building. It is linked to maybe even career planning. Then, is it systematic, measurable, repeatable? Does succession planning have a process? Yes, you do identify people who are potential. They will go through that AC, DC. They will be trained. They will be sent to so many different places for their capability building, etc. So obviously, succession planning is a very systematic process. It is measurable, it is repeatable, and at the same time, it is also scalable. But it is not applicable for hundreds and thousands of people, but it is certainly whomever are the people who are identified, you can scale it up to them. Then let us look at the implementation. Succession planning is implemented in all the potential areas. What does this mean? Yes, you will need a succession planning process to be working in all the areas that are very critical to the organization. Whichever job profiles are very, very critical from the BCP, it could be a finance controller, it could be the operations head, or it could be somebody who's looking at taxation or governance. There are many key or critical positions. So you should be able to implement it in all the potential areas. Implementation plan is systematic and executed in a planned manner. A company like even BPCL, the case study which you are going through, they have a target. They say that because our workforce is retiring, we are an organization which is getting into many new areas, and thereby we are wanting a good pipeline or a talent pipeline to be built, and we would want to aim that we are able to have at least one backup for each and every critical position. So it is a systematic one, and you can also execute it. You can also have a plan as to how is it that you want to fill up the entire the succession planning pipeline, whatever you had planned in terms of a pipeline with some graded milestones. Implementation framework has the ability to absorb changes. Now, when you have developed a succession planning framework, while generally succession planning is for the top and the senior management, you can also tweak it accordingly to suit many of the other operational roles also. You don't need to do something totally different. If you are able to design it in a good manner, you can also use it for the other levels of people also. Next, let us come to this evaluation and learning. Approach and deployment are regularly measured. Now, how do you measure the approach of the success of succession planning? Meaning to say that there are no challenges with respect to business continuity. Even 2 or 3 people have moved out, you are still, the organization is rock solid. It is not impacted very much. So that is what shows the effectiveness of the approach. What are the efficiency lead indicators? It could be a number of high potentials who have been identified, or it could be the number of programs or the number of hours you have invested in terms of training them, or it could be the mentoring and the coaching for many of the people who are identified as high pods who are going to take up those critical positions. That is what internal and external learnings are used as trigger. Now, how can you benchmark that process? How can you learn? Maybe one is from your own experiences you can learn. Maybe there are many other organizations, leading organizations, which are very good with respect to succession planning. You go to the case of a Unilever or a Tata's, they are people who churn out leaders by huge numbers. They've got a very good practice. You can also take those external triggers, try to understand how they are doing, and then once you come back and implement, then almost all the elements of E&L is also done. So the same way, like whatever I shared with you just now on the example of the succession planning, whether it is for performance management, whether it is for employee involvement or engagement or competency mapping or recruitment, induction, any and every process has to go through the OPEL if it has to attain a certain degree of maturity. So this is how the OPEL is applied. Yes, please, any questions? Is the concept clear now? Looks like most of you are on a Mount Rath today.
Yes, sir. Concepts are now clear.
Clear? Yeah. Anybody else? So I hope both these examples were useful for you in terms of understanding how to make use of OPEL as a tool for process maturity, process improvement, and also an assessment tool. This is where I said on day one when we started this program that this framework or this tool of an OPEL can be used as from an implementer's perspective, and it can also be used as a assessment tool. That is where we make use of it in an assessment. So that's the power of this tool.
Good morning, Shiva. This is Vijay Lakshmi.
Yes, ma'am. Tell me.
But I think trying to find out all these attributes in any process is only completely possible when we have the site visit also along with the report. Coming
That
out
is true, correct.
conclusions from the report, I think it is difficult.
From the report, it is difficult. See, this report is something like a trailer of a movie. Any report for that matter is something like a trailer of a movie. You will not be able to get the complete hang of it. Unless and until if the applicant is really good, if they are very seasoned in the area of excellence, then you would find that the document would be really good. Many mature applicants are able to give a very good flavor of the E&L. But for people who are a little bit new, getting into it for the first time, etc., they may not be able to put it across very well. But even if the document is not all that great, but it doesn't mean that they are not doing a good job. When you go to the site, you can certainly find a lot of people doing a good job. So ultimately, it is a site visit which really gives us the proof.
Yeah, that is what I was feeling when you were explaining all this.
Yes. Give me a moment. Let me just close the windows. A lot of dogs around the vicinity. Sorry for that. Yes, please. Anything else before we go into the next topic?
So one question, sir. So if in this ODEL framework,
Yeah.
if a particular process is meeting all the elements, all the requirements, except for say L, so still we categorize it as a OFI, not as a strength.
Okay. See, look at this. There are three ways. When we are looking at an element called as a deployment or implementation, the implementation could have strengths as well as OFIs. Let me try to tell you how. If there are 4 categories of employees, now the process addresses, let us try to take an example of a performance management system. You will find that the performance management system is very well established for probably only 2 categories of employees. For the other 2 categories, it is not all that robust, or there might be a gap. So while you can give a strength for the 2 categories for which it has been done well, the other 2 categories for which the performance management system has not been implemented or is, I would say, a little bit weak, not all that robust, you can still give an OFI on that. That is the reason why it says that approach is consistently implemented in all the potential areas. So there could be a few areas where it is not done well, so it could be an OFI. Now, when it comes to the approach has to be good. If there is an approach, but the approach is not too very sound, you can still give an OFI in that. Let us say a company is having a process for doing an employee satisfaction survey. But for whatever reason, you believe, because of the discussions what you had with them, that the process, while they are having it for the namesake, but the process is not too very robust in terms of its objective of eliciting the needs and expectations. Then in that case, approach becomes an OFI. If an approach has an OFI, then there is no point going into the deployment and the E&L. But in many other areas, the approach could be good, but the implementation can be flawed. That happens in many of the government schemes also, no? That happens in many of our own organizations also. Why only blame the government? There is a policy or there is a process. Very clear guidelines, everything is laid out well. But when you go to the implementation, in few units it is implemented well, in few units it might not be implemented well. So there is no problem with the approach. The problem is with the deployment or with the implementation. When you are looking at E&M, classical case, ISO 9000, approach is there, you are certified, you also go through audits, deployment is also there, and it is also being measured. Every 6 months the auditor comes, he will look at it, he will tell you NCs, he will tell you major non-conformances, minor non-conformances, everything. But when it comes to E&L, no changes. The change in the document is a change only when the standard got changed. So then what does it mean? There is no learning and improvement at all. So in that case, M will be green because you are having management reviews. You are having the management representative sharing lot of information. You are reviewing the NCRs. You are acting on it. So M is certainly there. Review is there. But L and I, nothing. Every day you do 10 or 20 improvements, but the document revision will never change. So then that L and I is absent. So there are many aspects. One is in approach. The approach could, if it is not robust, it can still be an OFI, or the absence of an approach, well, obviously it is a very grave OFI. Deployment, the intent may be good, but deployment may be totally flawed, or it might be flawed in some aspects. So that can be an OFI. In terms of the E&L, the measurement might be there, but the learning and improvement may not be there. That can be an OFI. Does that answer the question, Amit?
Yes, sir.
Shiva,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a small doubt.
Yeah, go ahead.
This acronym OPEL, what does it start with? Outcome. Is it does it have any significance, or it's outcome based design process?
No. Why we have named it as an OPEL is ultimately the tool. See, you need an assessment tool for a process, for an enabler, and also for a result. Results, what? Results give you an outcome. P is for process. Evaluation and learning is something that you need to improve upon regularly. So OPEL has just been given or used as an acronym. So there is an OPEL for the enablers and there is an OPEL for the results. That is how we have named it. So OPEL is a very generic measurement tool for which we have just coined an acronym called as outcomes, process, evaluation and learning. That's it.
Yeah, Shiva, going back to the previous discussion, like you have said, suppose there is a approach, there is a system which has a good approach and the deployment is good, and maybe it's a new system, a lot of performance data is not available, so E&L has not happened, or maybe the system for E&L has also not been designed. So when we see approach and deployment is good, but E&L is not there. So what is it? Like it's a strength or it should be converted to role?
I was not able to hear you very clearly, Vandana, but let me try to answer. Please tell me whether I got your question right. What you are saying is the approach is also there, deployment is also there, but the E&L is absent. When you are saying E&L is absent, if they have not decided how to measure the success of it, then the approach itself has an OFI. For example, you have somebody has designed a process, somebody is implementing it, but you don't know whether it is working for you or not. If there are no measures for the effectiveness, then it means that the approach itself is deficient because it has not thought about the quality of the metrics. When you say approach, when you say the quality of thought process, the quality of thought should be in terms of how to design it, how to implement it, and what to measure. Everything should be clear in an approach. So if the metrics have not at all been thought about, then it means that the approach itself is deficient. Or many a time some metrics may be there, but the metric, whatever is chosen, may not be appropriate. So even then the approach then becomes a casualty. Does that answer your question, Vandana?
Yes, Shiva. What about the process is new? There's not enough data to evaluate. So
Don't worry, that we will, if the process does not have enough data, we will go into the result OPEL later when we do the exercise tomorrow. On that, a different one, we will discuss about it tomorrow.
okay.
Currently, our focus is only on the processes, that's it. So, is the OPEL clear now? Okay, let me try to now, from technical, we will move into a little bit of the non-technical one. So, Sumana, I hope you are online, right?
Yeah, Shiva, I am online.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So why I have asked for Sumana is now we will try to discuss about the roles of the assessors plus the applicants. What is it? How do you go about starting? So please, bear in mind that Sumana is the sole window person for the entire HR Excellence Award, whether it is an applicant, whether it is an assessor, whether it is the timeline, anything and everything. She is the sole point of contact. For all applicants, assessors, any issues relating to it, always feel free to reach out to her. So as you know, the HR Excellence Award is being administered by our SNCEL Center for Kolkata, and Sumana works over from that COE. So one is, let me quickly go through as to why the HR Excellence Award was instituted. This was while all of you as applicants mainly look at this from a reward and a recognition perspective, but just wanted to share that while we at CII believe that rewards and recognitions are also important in terms of motivating and keeping the people also a little bit competitive and compared to the industry, etc. But the sole motive of the HR Excellence Award is to improve the quality of the HR processes and look at good results, thereby making the organization more competitive through HR. That is what is the final objective of CII for bringing out the HR Excellence Award. So at the same time, with all due respects to many of the big and the large consulting organizations, if you have to consult with them, they are going to charge you a bomb. And what comes to you through HR Excellence is 4 assessors of your peers work for you tirelessly along with their own jobs at a cost that you can't even compare with any organization which says that they are going to do an HR audit. So this is more of a membership service. CIS, as you know, we are a membership organization, and our endeavor is to help the membership. So whatever is coming to you in terms of value add, believe me, it is not an understatement to say that many a time even our costs would also not be covered. So you are getting quite a lot of value add with respect to this particular activity, which is a membership initiative that is driven by the members and then for the members. So the first thing when we are trying to look into the HR excellence assessment, how do we go about, etc., the award assessment process? I think Sumana would already be in touch with you that potential applicants, what is the last date for registering, etc. I think this is one of the last programs, right, Sumana? One of the last programs, because already the timelines are already through, and just the documents just need to come in, a few of them.
Yeah, I have already started receiving documents for the last 2 batches. We are receiving the documents.
Sure. So the documents have already come in, and this is one of the last training batches, mainly for also soliciting assessors, plus also for many of the people who are also facing the assessments in terms of knowing what sort of questions are asked, how is it that the assessors are going to evaluate us, how is it that we need to put our best foot forward. So that is also one of the reasons as to why we conduct this program. So for anybody to become an assessor, going through this 3-day program is mandatory. And not only this 3-day or this 5 module, 3-day was when we were doing it in person. Now it is these 5 modules. Attending this, all the 5 modules is mandatory. And also the exercises, whatever you are attempting, etc., these are a must. If you have not been able to work on the exercises, if you are not been able to participate in all the activities, etc., then there is a possibility that you may not be enlisted as an assessor. And in each and every program, based on the pre-work, based on your participation, based on the quality of the comments and the engagement within the program, we take quite a lot of people into the assessor database. Also, we look into something called as an assessor profile. Sumana will share those the assessor profile also with you.
Yes, I will share it tomorrow, the profile form.
Yeah, so she will share the profile form with you tomorrow. You will need to fill it up, put up your digital photograph, scan it, and then send it across to her. And what we do is based in each and every program, depending upon, as we said, the quality of the interactions and the involvement, etc., we pick up a number of people as designated assessors who can go out and do assessments. The number can be 100%, 80%, 50%, it varies. It's again, as I said, there is a continuous evaluation that goes on by the Secretariat in terms of each and every assessor training program that we do. So we also have something called as a live assessor database. Live assessor database meaning to say that people who have been active in the assessment in the last 3 years, those are the people whom we consider as live. And also new people who enroll, who complete this program successfully, they also get in as registered assessors into the database. Because the number of applicants are less and the number of people whom we train are more, it is quite possible that you may not get an opportunity to be a part of an external assessment team. So due to which, maybe if not this year, maybe next year, we might call you, because in each and every team, either there is one newcomer or sometimes there might be 2 newcomers. So while all of you get trained, for you to get an opportunity every year might be a little bit difficult. But even though you are shortlisted, if you don't get called for an assessment, it doesn't mean that you are not done well. It is only because the number of applicants are limited. So that has nothing to do with your competency or your capability. So that is also one more thing where we seek your understanding. So then as per the award admin secretariat's timelines, the applicant will share a 50-page document to the award admin secretariat. And then the secretariat does the allocation of the assessors. The allocation of assessors, when we get into a team of 4 or in case of larger organizations, a team of 6, what we do is we take the conflict of interest. We make sure that there is no competitor or anybody else who comes into your company. So Sumana will check with the applicant coordinator that we are likely to send a team consisting of people from these. We don't give the names, we only share the names of the organizations. if you have a conflict of interest, you can say no because he's our supplier, probably he's our competitor, etc. But generally we take care of that. And at the same time, somebody who has already done an assessment in the previous year is not eligible to be a part of the team. So every time it will always be a new team. So out of the 4 people, the senior assessor is somebody who will be an HR head, or he would have done multiple number of assessments. And there is also a second person just as a sort of a backup in case of any extreme or some emergencies. Somebody else should also be able to take over. If the senior assessor has done 5 or 6 or 10 assessments, the second assessor would have done at least around 4 or 5 assessments. Then the third person would have done either 1 or 2, and the last person is somebody who is a new assessor. So that is how we also keep the momentum going, as well as churning the assessor data pool. While we do have a few of the people who are independent and consultants or freelancers, but ideally we would generally want to take people who are serving as well as who are active. Earlier we used to have a lot of people who were retired also as a part of the assessor database, while we even have it now, but the number has reduced to a great extent. That is mainly because one is applicants also want working professionals, and ultimately this is also a capability building exercise for all the serving professionals in the area of HR. That is the reason why we also, our wish is to have more working professionals. That is where we also solicit your nominations. So once the assessors are shortlisted, once the conflict of interest is done, then the document comes to you. And just like how you have received the PPCL document, you will receive a hard copy of the document. As of now, we are not very keen on the soft copies, not because of any convenience, that is absolutely fine. But sometimes it might become a challenge if those if they get into any other places, inadvertent usages, postings, etc. So that is the reason. Many of you, if you are first timers, if you are wanting, because for the document feedback, etc., the soft copy, what you need to send is only to Sumana and nobody else. Only if Sumana says that you can send it to so and so, only then. Right, Sumana? That's right?
Yes, please. Yes, Shiva. Correct.
Because we don't want the document to be uploaded any of the, because many of our assessors are also in the, in their, urge to spread good practices. It shouldn't happen that your documents go all across the social media. So we are a little bit careful of that. And maybe we are too very cautious, but still as a membership organization, our endeavor is to keep the confidentiality as well as the other informations intact. So that's the reason why we still go by the hard copies. I think now compared to the last 2 months, there are no issues. I think all the printing presses are all open. The courier services are all there. So we don't find any challenges in terms of getting the document printed or being sent across by a courier, etc. So we would still be sticking on to the same conventional method. So the award admin will get the documents from the applicant, and these will be sent. And as people who are into assessments, just like how we have done the BPCL document, you will need to read through the complete document end to end. You will have to make your individual assessments. You will have to write your strengths and OFIs for each one of the criterion, from criterion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For all of them, you will need to write your strengths and OFIs. And then we have what we call as a process of consensus. Now that is something that we are going to start off with in the next, maybe after the tea break or so. In the consensus, what happens is also the senior assessor will split the team into 4. When we say split the team, while there are 4 people, each one of you will take the responsibility of leading one criterion. All of you will have to do the assessment of all the criterion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the senior assessor will say, he will say, Amit will do criterion 1. He will lead the discussions for criterion 1, and then also the result criterion that is associated with 6A and 6B connected with leadership. Similarly, maybe the senior assessor will say, I will take care of strategy and 6A and 6B portion of it. And the third assessor, he might have to take care of probably criterion 3 and the associated results. Somebody else criterion 4 and 5. So that's how the work will also get divided. Now, why this work gets divided is to make sure that everybody gets a shot in terms of leading the team and leading the discussions. There is a senior assessor. Of course, the senior assessor is a lead. But what you will have to do as a team, as a criterion lead is, all of them will send their complete assessments to the entire members of the team. Let's say, for example, now Das is taking care of criterion 2. He has to read through all the strengths and OFIs of criterion 2 given by all his co-assessors. And then he has to find some unique points, he has to find the common points, he has to discuss whichever are the points that are a little bit different. He needs to consolidate it. That is what is called as a consensus. He does that pre-consensus activity. And then there is a telecon. All these years we were having a telecon. Now you can have a Google Meet, you can have a Cisco WebEx or whatever. Now freewares are all across the place. So all the 4 assessors over a period of 2 months, let us say you receive the document today on the day of, let us say 18th or 19th August. The site visit will be in the end of September or probably October first week. Between now till October first week, you will have at least 4 Google Meets or Skype calls or a Cisco WebEx or whatever, wherein each criterion lead will discuss with all the people virtually on the pre-consensus, on the collation, on the collated criteria, because you would have said it is a strength, somebody else will say it is a OFI. 3 people say strength, another person says it is a OFI. You will have to discuss, you will have to thrash out, you will have to come to a common agreement. This is what is called as a consensus. So this consensus happens as a preparatory activity in the first 1.5 months before you get onto a physical site visit going onto the site. Now this year is an exceptional year. It is quite possible that if the situation does not improve dramatically, it is quite possible that the assessment may also be virtual. Like how we are having this program on a virtual basis, even the assessment may also be virtual. Or if things bounce back, as we see today's paper, more than, in many places close to we have 60 to 70% of the people having antibodies. If within the next 2 months, if we are all back to normal, it is quite possible that we may still can go to the sites. But of course, health, safety, protocols, they will be the first point of care, both from the applicant as well as from an individual, as well as from CIS perspective. Only if everything is okay, then there may be a site visit, or else the assessment might still be virtual also. We are keeping both the options open. Right now, Sumana?
Yes, Shiva, yes. I am trying to actually, map regional assessors at least one, so that if it is required, so that he can go for a 1-day visit. And the others will join on a digital mode.
So our endeavor is, since we have a pan-India presence and assessors are also there pan-India, so we are trying, as we said, this is only a trial. We are trying to see as to how to make it feasible, not guaranteed. At least we are trying to have one local assessor, because ultimately HR is all about culture. So it would be good if at least one person or 2 people, if they are from the same location, they are able to go to the site, have an interaction with the people, with all the protocols, social distancing, all that things in place, so that we get a better feel. The other 3 assessors can always get connected. So the options are still open, but the assessment is certainly on. So when we go to the site visit, whatever are the OFIs, whatever are the site visit issues, whatever we have collected during the consensus, all these things will get clarified at that point of time, because we see the presentations, we see the data, we are talking to the people, we are seeing objective evidences, strengths becomes OFIs, OFI will become strengths, etc. So the entire pre-consensus activity will also have another activity called as a post-consensus activity during the site visit. In case of a physical site visit, when we go to the site, every day evening, the assessors come back to the guest house or the hotel or wherever they are put up. Then they exchange their findings. Whatever activity is completed, then the particular criterion lead along with the other co-assessors will also sort of sanitize all the findings and then make sure that the new list of post-visit strengths and OFIs are also done. And how do we plan the site visit? Generally, all the people get together. In case of an on-site physical site visit, you travel on a Saturday, you meet up on a Sunday. Sunday morning till evening, you are in the hotel or in the guest house. Because all these days it was a virtual discussion. Now there is a face-to-face discussion. You finish off all the discussions, you will prepare the list of site visit issues, etc. Then after that, then on Monday, all of you will go to the site. Maybe the applicant will take you through one round of the plant, quick round of the plant, just for half an hour or 45 minutes, more for acclimatizing yourself with what sort of an organization you are getting into. So after that, once that is done, then there is a customary opening meeting where you get introduced to all the process leads. This assessment team will also share what is the protocols of the assessment and the finer points, etc. So then there is also likely to be a discussion with the CEO for around half an hour, just to understand what are his thoughts, his overview, what is it that he is asking you to look into as far as the assessment insights are concerned. So after that, there will be a long discussion with the CHRO and his entire team to understand the HR strategy. And during this time, all the 4 or the 6 assessors will be together, because strategy is something that is common. All of you will need to understand together. After you do this, let's say by this time it would have been post-lunch. Post-lunch, the team is going to split into 2 or 3. If there are 6 people, it will be 3 teams of 2 people each. Or if it is a 4-member team, it will be a 2-member team each. Because I said assessment will always have 2 people, audit can still have 1. So these 2 people, they will go and meet the different leads. Maybe first you will go and talk with maybe the somebody who is heading PMS, then maybe you'll go to corporate communications, you'll go to whoever is the engagement manager. Maybe you may walk the floor, you may have a talk with some of the supervisors, you may have a focus group discussions, you may have a discussion only with the team leads, you may take a walk through the floor in terms of assessing the product or the service line, whatever it is. So, and you will also meet all the people, somebody who is heading comp and ben, recruitment, exit management, people who is looking at surveys. You may call a couple of customers, you may call up a couple of partners, or you may go to them. So all these activities will happen between Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, or if the site is a little bit large, maybe even on a Thursday. It all depends. Then after you do this, what happens is before you leave the site, let us say the assessment gets completed on Wednesday evening or Thursday afternoon. Again, you get back to your hotel, and together you spend one day. You will polish up your entire report. And before you leave the site, it is obligatory and mandatory that you need to give a closing meeting presentation to the entire top management, top and the senior management, wherein you give them a sneak peek into the report, a high level PPT of the strengths and OFIs of the assessment, without any scores. So once you do that, once that is completed, we always encourage that the reporting should be completed then and there, because after you get back into your companies, it is next to impossible. You can't look at anything. So please finish off all the reporting, strengths, OFIs, post consensus, post scoring. Finish all that and mail it to the award admin secretariat, hand over all the documents, whatever is there, to the applicants, and then come back. Only keep the notes, whatever you have made. That is very, very important. And at the same time, a few other things which we want you to make sure that during a site visit, if at all, if there are freelancers, etc., they can't go on peddling their consulting wares. They are there for a reason. And all of you as assessors have also got a very important role. You are representing your organization. You are also representing CII as a part of that activity. You need to be professional. You can't say that, chalo, ye process into the depth. I will try to get these documents. Please do not do that. These are all prohibited. I mean, once you are in touch with an assessment team as well as an applicant, they're always friends for life, they're all professionals. You can always network with them later. But please remember that you are there on a job. So you need to make sure that you do justice to the job for which you have gone. So be professional, and whatever documents you have collected for reference purposes or for making your reports, etc., all of them need to be mandatorily returned to the applicant before you come back. That is something that is mandated as per the guidelines of the assessment. And few other do's and don'ts. For the applicants, we always encourage, in case of a physical site visit, it is better that somebody accompanies the assessment team at all points of time. Because if some data is asked, some information is asked, they must be able to share that information and data by the end of the day. You can't say that I will collect all that and then give the information before the assessor leaves and say, मैंने information दिया, आपने OFI दिया है. That is not permissible. Any clarification sought, any informations that were sought, those should be provided to the assessment team at the end of the day or at a reasonable amount of time. If he says, can you show me an analysis, you cannot say, हमने सर्वे 3 साल का किया, ये सब documents है. You can't give one huge bundle of documents and say, you please do the analysis. Assessor's job is not to analyze your company's reports. He is only asking whether you have done it or not. So there are certain rules in an assessment. So these are all some things. And also when it comes to the softer portions of the applicant and the assessment interaction, please be very, I would say, a little bit careful in terms of the hospitality and the other things, what is accepted, what is not accepted. As far as the assessor is concerned, is in case of a travel, all is travel plus the shortest to travel in case of an air travel or probably in case of a train travel, first class AC or second class AC, whatever is available, etc. Those are all the costs that are associated by the applicant, by the assessor. Those will be borne by the assessee. Stay, travel, boarding, lodging, etc. except liquor, tobacco and anything else. All reasonable expenses will be covered. And if at all, if let us say you have got guest houses beyond the assessment, if somebody wants to stay over there and they are wanting to go on a sightseeing spree, etc., those are all not permitted as per the rules of the assessment. If somebody wants to stay, he can stay on his own, but not at the expense of the applicant. So if there are any such issues that are coming up, we would request all the co-assessors as well as the applicants to please share any ethics as well as any violation in terms of the norms and value systems, etc. Please feel free to call up Sumana. And we would not even, while you can drop in a mail, please be rest assured that your confidentiality is taken care of, because the CII award admin cannot be there at all points of time. You are representing CII and you are also a brand ambassador of your organization. And you are a brand ambassador of the CIHR award assessment process. So anything that is going wrong in the assessment, either from the applicant's front, either from the assessor front, it might be your co-assessor, it may be a senior assessor, whoever it is, if there are issues of violation, please call up Sumana. She will be more than happy to respond instantaneously. And if you are an applicant, we always request you to make sure that when you are nominating somebody as a single point of contact or as a SPOC, please make sure to put up a senior functionary. Please do not put up a very junior person to front end the discussions with the assessors, because the assessors who are coming in are also from a very, very senior level and they expect a little bit of a hierarchy or the other ones, because they may need quite a lot of information which somebody from the junior management may not be able to really give that. So, and you must also remember that this is not a paid activity, this is an honorary activity that the assessors are doing. So as applicants, there is a need for us also to make sure that we reciprocate, we behave in the correct terms, etc. So both there are codes of conduct both for the assessors as well as the applicants. And we have taken quite a lot of, on many occasions, we have taken disciplinary action against the assessors also who are not up to the mark. There were cases where, there were some sort of favors and not so very great, I would say, feedback from the place where they were staying, etc. So such people have been summarily taken out of the assessment system. Somebody was saying that I can help you in this process. I am a consultant. I work with XYZ company, etc. Soliciting or peddling all those wares will lead to disqualification and they can never ever come back into CII. If at all, as applicants, if you come across any such people doing that, please, we request you to bring these to the notice of the award admin secretariat, because the ultimate, I would say, the watchdogs of this process is each one of us. If we are not bringing out such issues to the fore, then we are doing a disservice to the entire HR Excellence Fraternity. So that is where we also seek your support. So once the assessment consensus, post site visit consensus, once this is all over, then you would have already shared the documents and the scores to the award admin secretariat. Any applicant who scores beyond 600, the senior assessor of that particular applicant will be called for the jury meeting in person or probably on a digital mode. Generally, in person is always the preferred mode. The senior assessor has to make a strong case to the jury as to why this company deserves an award, why this company is standing out. So it is very important that as an assessor as well as applicant, you must be able to prove that with conviction as to what is really unique about you, wherein you deserve the award once you cross that 600. So that is where I said writing your notes, making all the observations, whatever you have done, because the jury meeting may happen in January, whereas the assessment may happen in October or November. So you must make sure that you have your notes and all the observations till the jury meeting is over. You can't say, "Arey maine wahan par gaya nahi, maybe the assessor, other assessor had gone, mujhe ye pata nahi." You cannot say all that. All the assessors will have to jointly own the report plus the findings, and anybody might be called. The senior assessor, let us say for some reason he is not available in India, he has gone abroad. So the second in command or somebody who is there in town may have to go. So you may have to go and represent the applicant in that award. And believe me, because you have done the assessment and you have that conviction, you must be able to convince the jury as to why they should get an award. And also handling a jury is also not something very easy. It might be something like your promotion interviews. You will have around 8 people, in a lighter vein, 8 people ganged up, I would say. All of them are the business heads or the CHROs of who is who of the Indian corporate. They will be throwing questions. They will be asking, what is the median wage? What would be the difference between the wage of the CEO to the last employee? Do they follow an affirmative code? Do you think they do good for the contract employees? What are some of the unique things that you looked at? What could be the leadership style over there? Don't you think this might be a point? And their questions will not be from the model. Their questions will be something beyond the model. Of course, nobody knows what they are going to ask and you may not have all the answers. But the point is, what we are trying to share with you is a sort of an FAQ into what sort of questions will generally come up in a jury meeting. Because the jury consists of people who, as I said, are CHROs whose companies are not involved in the assessment process. So we have a very clear guideline and protocol to be followed in terms of a conflict of interest, etc. So the jury is somebody who is very, very ruthless, and the questions could be very, very sharp and incisive. And that's the reason why all of you would need to be up to that task. So that's about, and we also hope that you will be able to get an opportunity to go and assess an award-winning company and also present to the jury. That is always our wish also. That is something that the conviction on of the process will also become that much stronger with all of you, if you are a part of it. And then the award admin will also conduct what is called as an HR conference, which many of you might know. Many of you have also attended. I think last year there was also a presentation from
I don't think anybody from this batch attended. This is maximum NTPC. I think Ramya and all, they attended.
Okay. But last time I think there was also a speaker from NTPC also, right?
Yeah, Mr. DS Rao was there. Mr. DS Rao, I think he was in the last batch, na Shiva, that is the.
Sure.
He was there, and I think Ramya came for the conference.
Okay. So that's where you also have something called as an award conference, where all the different levels of recognition, both the award prize and the other levels based on whatever are the scoring levels or the threshold, they will also be given out. And that is what culminates the entire HR, award assessment process that goes on from year on year. So that's about it. Any questions on so far on the award administration, the process, and anything on the assessments?
Shiva, there is some question in the chat box. Actually, they are asking for the SOPs, do's and don'ts. We do share something.
Do's and don'ts for the assessors. Yes, what we conduct is there is something called as a webinar that we conduct for many of the people. for most of the assessors who are selected for the current year's award cycle, there is something called as a refresher webinar, wherein we take them through a quick technical brush up of the entire award assessment. And at the same time, we also give those do's and don'ts, etc. Even though those are all very well known, but still there are a few cursory slides in that. So that is not a part of this particular program, but when you get into the assessment, we will share that with you. But we don't have a booklet, but it is more of a presentation which we make available to all the eligible assessors for that award assessment cycle. Yeah, the award assessment process is reviewed every year, like how we ask you to do an E&L. We also have an E&L. The jury and the HR committee will always give us certain suggestions in terms of how to modify or what needs to be checked or what needs to be changed, etc. So these things are all there and they get incorporated into the award assessment process every year. So does anybody go through the OFIs and the strengths given by the assessor team vis-a-vis their quality norms? Now here, when it comes to that, it is the assessment team which has seen the applicant, and there is no moderation done by the award administration secretariat. People who have gone and done the assessment are the final judges. We don't sit on any of those judgment, but obviously the senior assessor and the entire team is answerable in terms of the quality. But the award admin secretariat does do a quick cursory check in terms of the quality of the document. When we say quality of the document, I'm saying the feedback report, whether does it have those 4 or 5 strengths or OFIs, whether is the score and the quality of the comments, do they match or not. They look at it. In case if there are some issues, they will request the senior assessor to re-look at it and then send a modified one that is appropriate. But there is no technical moderation, there is no score moderation. There is nothing that is done by the award admin secretariat, because the assessment is done by the team who goes over there, and we don't have anything different on that. Yes, please. Any other questions?
Shiva.
Yeah.
Mustafa. I have 2 questions. One is, what is the validity of this award? As in 1 year or 3 years? As you mentioned, the assessment, you take report for the last 3 years. So what is the validity of
the assessment as such does not have a validity, because it is only for that year, because this is not an audit. Like an audit certificate would be valid for 3 years. Here, we say that you are an award winner or you are a prize winner. If somebody is an award or a prize winner having crossed 600, he cannot participate for the next 3 years. That means
3 years. Okay.
The organization is so very good, it has to maintain that level of performance for the next 3 years.
Okay.
So that is what we say. But you can say that your organization has been commended for this level, or it is at the significant performance level, etc. in this particular year. That can always be made use of that.
Okay. And so generally in the audit, what we have seen is that the first thing, so suppose I've got an award and then for the next years we cannot participate, and the 4th year again we have participated. So the first thing that which we used to do earlier is that whatever are the open audit paras of the last assessment, and that's the first question that team asks. Does it the same thing happen here as well? The first thing you look at is the OFIs of the last team in the feedback report?
Good point. Anyway, I was about to answer that. Here, it does not happen that way, because this is, as I said, this is not an audit. This is an assessment. Assessment always starts with a fresh pair of eyes, with a fresh pair of assessors, whereas in an audit, the same auditor comes back. So as an applicant, if you want to share what are the previous OFIs and what is the action taken report, you are free to do. But an assessor is not expected to ask, show me the action taken report, tell me what you have done, I will start from that. That is not a premise. Everything starts with a clean slate, because
beautiful. That's what I want to ask.
The business context would have changed, the assessment team has changed, and maybe the HR strategy could have changed after 2 years. So it is not a right way to start on an auditing mode, and that is not there. And you can very clearly say that out. If the assessors ask that I would want to have a look at the previous assessment report, can you share? You can say, we have been given to understand by CII that as a part of the process, it is not, we are not mandated to share the previous report and the ATR report, and the assessment starts on a fresh slate. You can say that because that is something that is a common rule that we have
Correct.
informed all our assessors and applicants. So there should not be any issues.
That's what I wanted. Yeah, this beautiful approach.
Sumana, has anybody asked for such a thing? Have you come across a few things?
What is it, Shiva? Can you just repeat? I didn't get you.
The question is whether any of the applicants previously have they asked saying that, I mean, during the assessment, can you share your previous assessment report, your feedback?
No, generally the assessors don't ask for all those. In case they have got very high marks or the difference is too much, they just ask me that what was their last year score range and all. So if it is too much and all, then only they have a question. Otherwise, they don't ask for it.
So it is not, because we always, I think we have sensitized all our assessors that this is not something that they need to ask. But what many applicants do is applicants who are at a higher level of maturity, where they feel that it is okay to share, they would have shared. Many of them do share and say that this is the activity what we have done. So if the applicant wants to do it, it is absolutely fine. But it is not mandated by the rules of the assessment as such. Yeah, anything else on this?
Sir, do you run any refresher courses also for your assessors, since not all are getting a chance to participate every year?
That's what, every year for people who have been shortlisted to be a part of the assessment team, so they will certainly call you. I mean, there will be a refresher program that
Yes,
happens.
this year also
You will
we
be
have
invited. Yes, please. Any other questions?
Shiva, prior to, like you said, before the site visit, the assessors, they do their own assessment based on the reports, and based on whoever is the team leader for a particular criteria, all the findings are sent to that particular individual for that particular criteria. And he is supposed to compile those, all these observations. And during site visit, before site visit, they do the consensus.
Correct.
Is it possible that prior to site visit, all the assessors find a particular process and they find a OFI in a particular process? All 5 of them say. And during site visit, because only 2 of the assessors go to the particular, to assess the criteria, and they find it to be a strength. For whatever reason, the reports could not bring out the strength of that particular activity. So then,
this is perfectly fine. It can happen at that. It can happen like that also. No issue. It can happen like that.
how do you come to a consensus after that?
No, that is what is called as a consensus. No, because that document may not be all that great, but when you go, you see the evidence. It is absolutely fine. And also, it is quite possible that you might have been a category lead during the pre-consensus for a particular criteria. But when you go to the site, you might do something else, because the findings as well as the documents, they are supposed to be understood in the same way by all the people. It is only for trying to give that flair of an assessment, etc. All of you will lead a particular criterion, but all of you own the report. All of you equally share the same report. All of you will do the assessment of all the criterion categories. Am I clear, Vijay Lakshmi? What I am saying is you will do the assessment of all criterion 1 to 6. Now you will share your report with your entire for the other 3 members, including the senior assessor. You might be given the responsibility of leading the discussions for criterion 5, the enablers and the results. So since you have the report of all the 4, all the other 3 also, you will collate, you will lead the consensus discussion during the telecon, etc. When you go over there, criterion 5 has many different parts. So out of the 2, 3, the other team may look, or 2 or 3, you and your other colleague may also look. But the entire assessment activity, the ownership is collective. It is not individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I guess now the assessment process and the other things are all clear now. Okay, so then I think we can now move to the one of the next topics for the day. Just give me a moment. Let me run back into the PPT. Okay. Now let us get into a session called as understanding the organization. Now all of you might have invested in mutual funds or many of the others. So the first thing what they ask you is something called as a KYC. Know your client, KYC. They give you a set of documents. They will ask you what is your Aadhaar number, what is the address, can you give me this proof, that proof, etc. Why? Because they are trying to understand you as a customer. So the same way here, when we are doing the assessment, we need to know our customer who is the applicant. That is where understanding the organization will be very, very difficult and will be very, very important. Understanding the context as well as understanding the complexity. Why? Because what is important to one particular sector may not be important to the other sector. Like let's say health safety requirements in a company like BPCL or IOCL might be much, much more when compared to, let us say, an organization like maybe Priyanka comes from a BPO. No doubt, there also health and safety is important, but in a company like BPCL, it is a refinery. It is, you are working with inflammable liquids, you are working with LPG. So the sectoral requirements or the focus of HSE will be much more in BPCL when compared to, Priyanka's organization. So this is where you must understand what are the finer drivers of the business.
Shiva, I think you are muted.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I didn't realize that while I was toggling with the slides. What I suggest is it is 11:25, just 5 minutes of the formal break. I will restart that session once again. We'll come back at 11:35, 10 minutes from now. Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, Shiva. Thank you. We'll start again afresh. I think we lost 5 minutes in between.
Sure, not a problem. We'll restart that from the order file once again.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you.
You know, the host of it,